They believed that you were only a supporting role in their little tale, a subdued presence that they could ignore, speak over, and disregard. It turns out that you just typed them out and were the author all along. It's amazing to see the look of astonishment and sheer fear on their faces when they discover you're not the shy little mouse they thought you were. You turned around and showed them who really controls this town after they had spent all that time making fun of you, underestimating you, and treating you as like you didn't matter. They're now worried, questioning themselves, trying to figure out how their confidence suddenly vanished and when the script changed. The nicest thing is that you gave them a reality check they didn't anticipate. There is nothing they can do about it. Before we go any further, please remember to like and subscribe, since the more people who believe in this message wake up, the more power weaklings lose. Let's get started. They felt they had figured you out, that you were a soft target for their private smirks. Now, take a look at them. Anxious, perplexed, and totally fixated on finding out how you become memorable after being invisible. The fact is that they were never strong, which is why they can't even look you in the eye now, even if they used to laugh at you. Their whole identity rested on your failure to recognize your own strength. The instant you did, the game was finished. It was sufficient to deconstruct them simply by standing in your truth and claiming your presence. You didn't even need to attempt. In a sense, they have seen a ghost, which is why they are acting as if they have. In front of them, they saw the death of the ghost of their own fantasies. You were only waiting for the right opportunity to flip the whole board when they believed they had you in checkmate and were invincible. This is humiliating for them. Let's face it. Did they really believe they could defeat a chosen one? The foolishness. They failed to understand that when they pursued you, they were not only against an individual. Rather, they were facing the universe, Ushroa, and the world doesn't play fairly. It plays to win. They now understand that there was never, ever a competition. To be honest, however, you almost gave them the victory. Yes, you. As you sat there, you questioned your value and wondered whether they were correct about you. Horrible. The world didn't bestow upon you all of this heavenly power just for you to sit there foolishly questioning it. You ought to have been more aware. They now understand that this has always been your world and was never theirs because you showed out instead of simply showing up. The same people who used to make fun of you are now silently observing, talking, and attempting to figure out how to win your favor again. However, it's too late. You just showed them who the true leader is in this town, and they will never be able to get over the fact that they believed you were a mouse. Tell me, can you sense that change, that indisputable force urging you on? This is something you'll feel in your bones if you're really selected, not simply something you hear. If you're prepared to take full use of your power, leave the number 88 in the comments. Tell your tale in the space provided here. Let's get started now. The game is done since they played themselves. They staked everything on the falsehood that you were beneath them, not simply underestimating you. But as soon as you stood in your truth, that illusion was destroyed. Their bloated egos led them to prance about, mistaking arrogance for power and loudness for strength. They were scurrying because they never knew you were the true author, even if they believed they were in charge and could make the rules. The cosmos doesn't stand for idiots, and you were the reality check they didn't anticipate. When they attacked you, they weren't only opposing a person. They were against destiny, and destiny never loses. You almost let them win, however, in spite of everything. You let their phony assurance and hollow words to rock your foundation. You couldn't yet recognize the strength that had always been within of you, so you questioned your value. However, you now realize that this is your world, not theirs. Their own ego had previously prevented them from seeing it. They sensed that you were becoming unbreakable while they were displaying power. They only realized what was always there. You didn't change. It is ripping them apart, yet they are unable to describe it. When you walk in, There's a weight in the room, not from your words or deeds, but just from your presence. Their outdated strategies, dismissiveness, conceit, and phony dominance no longer work. They falter, fumble, and hesitate because they realize that true power just is. It doesn't shout or perform, and that scares them. Without doing a single thing, you completely upend their universe. They didn't think much of you, but now they can't stop thinking about you. They are constantly reminded of who they are not and who you are, quiet. They saw your patience as irrelevant and your quiet as weakness. However, that delusion has vanished. Their ego is on display, their confidence is broken, and the mask is coming off quickly. They ultimately understand they gambled against the wrong one, and you never had to prove anything. You simply had to be. Since there is no turning back this time, let them struggle and sit with their remorse. They are unable to ignore the fact that you have stepped into your power. They believed they were in charge of the plot, but this was always your story, and they just had a part to play before being permanently written out. Their actions speak for themselves, yet they will never apologize. Even when they refuse to accept their mistakes or how poorly they miscalculated you, their hesitancy and quiet say more than any apology ever could. Their current movements, careful, uncertain, avoiding eye contact, show it. They no longer exude the confidence they formerly displayed around you. They saw you as a minor figure in their egocentric universe back then, a nobody. They don't know how to behave around you anymore. Every look is careful, every word calculated. Why? They realize deep down that they made a mistake, and nothing they say can make up for their conceit. They can't take their eyes off you now, even if they didn't see you coming. They made you feel tiny, confined you, and looked down on you for a long time. However, you were quietly getting up while they were playing games, and when the time came, you didn't need to do anything since your very presence was enough to shatter their illusions. They merely realized who you've always been. You didn't change. Now that they have lost control and their confidence has transformed into bewilderment, what's the finest part? You never need their approval or acknowledgement. They are now the ones sitting in quiet, troubled by the reality they chose not to see, whereas you were never looking for approval. You just let your strength to speak for itself. Allow them to ponder, worry, and experience what they have been trying so hard to avoid. They were too preoccupied with giggling at the room's peril to notice it. They no longer laugh. Instead, there is stillness, and inside that silence, their anxiety erupts. They saw your silence as weakness and your inaction as inconsequential. They believed you didn't important since you didn't compete for attention. However, you were just observing, waiting, and giving them the impression that they were in charge. You were never attempting to prove anything. You allowed people to see you as innocuous, insignificant, and simple to ignore, not because you were weak, but because you understood that true strength doesn't shout, but rather strikes quietly. You saw every slight, every time they brushed you off, and as they settled into their delusion, you were getting ready for the surprise they never anticipated. Now that it's arrived, they're rushing. Their confidence is broken, their laughing sounds forced, and their voices tremble. There is no denying the change, even if they refuse to acknowledge it. All that's left is the eerie knowledge that they were playing themselves, and the power they believed they possessed was never genuine. Let them sit in the misery of their conceit and relive every moment, because the game they believed they were playing, it was always yours. It was never theirs. Now they're the ones doubting everything, even if they encouraged you to doubt yourself. The backhanded compliments, the phony concern, and all those subtle barbs were all part of a plan to keep you small and make you doubt your strength. To maintain their delusion, they need your hesitancy. But everything changed the instant you entered your truth. Since they realize the game is over, they no longer talk with the same assurance. and instead overthink, falter, and hesitate. They put a lot of effort into keeping you in the dark because they always recognized your potential. It was always about control, not your value. In actuality, they were afraid of what would happen if you ever came to terms with your true identity, which you have now. Their whole charade has fallen apart because you no longer question yourself. Their confidence is gone, and doubt has taken its place. They now monitor what they say and behave differently around you because they know they can no longer control you, not because you have changed. Instead of arguing or fighting, you just stopped shrinking, and that quiet change was more powerful than any conflict. They are now plagued with the reality they never thought you would see, so let them struggle with the uncertainty they attempted to suffocate you in. They broke themselves instead of trying to break you. All they did was create a monster, but they believed they had broken you. They didn't realize they were burying themselves when they thought they could bury you. They put difficulties, deception, and falsehoods at you in the hopes that you would crumble. However, every effort to make you weaker simply made you stronger. Every injury turned into knowledge. Every betrayal became flame. You were becoming unbreakable while they believed you were collapsing. They were shaping you, not shattering you. Since a chosen one who is unaware of their strength is easy to manipulate, they attempted to keep you tiny and instill doubt in you because they never wanted you to understand your power. However, they lost all control over you once you stopped trying to get their favor, saw through their deceit, and maintained your ground. They can hardly believe what they see when they look at you now. Someone who is stronger, wiser, colder, and fearless. Observe their worry, hesitation, and the loss of confidence they formerly shown around you. When they used to ignore you, they now walk carefully because, in reality, they didn't eliminate you. Instead, they created something that scares them. You almost gave up, nearly bought their lies, and nearly allowed them to triumph, but you didn't. Now that you've risen and changed, you're more than simply a survivor. You're their greatest fear. Let them put up with it. The throne was only loaned to them. It was never theirs. While reality waited patiently to reveal the truth, they sat on a throne of illusion and played rulers. They acted as if authority belonged to them, spoke as though they were untouchable, and walked like kings. However, borrowed power always has a time limit. They only briefly held that throne, supported by deceit, manipulation, and power. They never really earned it. Because true power is steady, unquestionable, and earned, it is not loud, strong, or phony. The true ruler is here now, and that is you. Claiming you were still beneath them, they attempted to disregard the change and cling to their fictitious feeling of power. Before they could respond, however, the earth shook under them. Reality is indifferent to ego. The difference between someone who is playing the role and someone who was born to lead is evident to everyone else, and they sensed the throne sliding, the respect eroding, and the energy shifting against them. You once felt they had something you didn't, and you even fell for their delusion. You now see, however, that they were just first and not superior. They were in power because up until now, no one had questioned them. Therefore, let them to hold on to their waning dominion. The throne was never really theirs, and it is now your turn to assume it. Why, you've already won the quiet fight. The weakest people are usually the loudest in the room. Real power just wins. It doesn't make an announcement. Power, in their opinion, included being the most noticeable and loud person in the room. Control was the foundation of their whole personas. They demanded attention, made people listen, and created the appearance of power. And it worked for a time. The performance captivated the audience. They mistook loudness for power, dominance for leadership, and arrogance for strength. Real authority, however, does not need an audience, nor does it require proof or begging for approval. True force strikes suddenly, develops in calm, and advances in silence. You were watching. You were taking in. You were becoming, while they were creating noise and creating their image. And it's over already. Before they even knew the combat had started, it was over. The actual battleground was never seen by them. That's why this triumph feels so good. They believed their presence was unassailable, and that they were in charge. They failed to realize, however, that the real game was taking place in the background, in the shadows, and in the quiet moments they never noticed. They thought that disputes, power struggles, and public victories were what war looked like. However, true wars, spiritual wars, occur in secret. The actual battle was fought at the times they mocked, ignored, undervalued, and threw you away. They had no idea that those incidents would be the catalyst for their demise, because you were quietly, steadily, and slowly acquiring power as they executed it. Now have a look at them, the ones who used to be so brazen and noisy. They don't speak. The problem with true strength is that it just is. It doesn't dominate. And when it does, illusions shatter rather than just disappear. Even if they are unable to articulate it, they sense it. When you walk in, they sense a change in energy. Their confidence falters in discussions that used to flow naturally, and their voices shake a little. Something changed, albeit they are unsure of what it was. And the fact is that just their viewpoint altered. They just now realize that you have always had the power. They anticipated that battle would resemble confrontation, open challenges, or occupying a space. However, endurance was more important in this fight than loudness. Who could stand their ground without being seen? Who could get up without being accepted? And who could prevail without ever having to engage in combat? You were that person. You just became unquestionable. You didn't have to persuade them of anything, debate with them, or demonstrate your value. Furthermore, if someone is unquestionable, their presence speaks for them. They no longer need to say anything. Because it was never about who yelled the loudest. Rather, it was about who remained standing after the noise subsided. You've already won. You were always destined for this, and it was about who the universe created for the long term. Let them feel the weight of their own insignificance. Let them writhe in the quiet, and let them sit with it. Because ultimately, what's lacking inside cannot be compensated for by performance. You just needed to endure them. You didn't need to battle them. This was a fight of presence, not a war of words. And you, chosen one, have already prevailed. So now all that remains is their quiet. The first people to laugh won't be the last. They made fun of you, but now they're the ones who live in the joke. The greatest joke ever. They really believed they were invincible. They grinned in your face, talked behind your back, made fun of your hardships, and scoffed at your attempts. To them, you were a source of amusement, someone they could minimize, disregard, and exploit to boost their brittle egos. They found it entertaining to make you feel as if you didn't belong, and found it humorous to see you stumble. However, they failed to see that the true joke was always on them and never on you. It's their time, because those who laugh the hardest at someone else's suffering are often the ones who are most afraid of experiencing their own. They were so arrogant and self-assured in their mockery of you because they believed you to be harmless. They believed you would never rise beyond what they determined you were, never fight back, and never find the courage to do so. They thought you were easygoing and would always keep your head down and remain little. However, they were completely mistaken. You were working, developing, and transforming suffering into strength, while others were laughing. Every insult turned into motivation. Every rejection became drive. Every betrayal, and every instance in which they attempted to diminish you into a lesser person became a stepping stone. Now they're not laughing at you because you were changing into something they couldn't comprehend or cope with. Now, have a look at them. Those who avoid eye contact are the same ones who grinned while you were having trouble.